you. Thanks for tuning into the Waiting List podcast. I'm Long Long.
I'm Daniel.
And I'm Jacqueline. And we are three watch friends with a healthy obsession for watches.
So sit back and relax with us while we chat with collectors, industry giants, and share some good vibes.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Waiting List podcast. Today, again, I'm joined with my co-hosts, Jacqueline and Daniel. And we have a very special guest today, Mr. Guido Terrani. Am I saying that correct?
Guido Terrani.
Terrani. Close enough. Okay.
Close enough.
And so if you guys don't know this, he is the current CEO of Parmigiani. And of course, we are very happy to have you on. And we are just going to dive right in. So I kind of wanted to go in with a whole background about you and how you've been with Bulgari for 2 decades and so on. But I think as we slowly go through the questions, this was just slowly unfold. But for people who are just like tuning in for the first time or haven't read up or haven't even read about Guido, he has been in the watch industry his whole career. And so my first question is, what was your impression of the brand before you joined? And how has it changed since you have become part of the family?
Well, I know Parmigiani since the beginning, since the year 2000. That's the first time I ever heard the name. And it was a name highly prestigious, and the craft and the details and the finishings of the watches has been always the hallmark of the brand, with its deep culture. And the impression that I had from the outside was really like a small jewel of the watch industry, with an incredible capacity from an industrial point of view, from a technical point of view. So this is something that remains, and it's confirmed in my impression coming in. And when I dived into the brand early this year, and I had the chance to meet Michele Parmigiani, which is still with us, and it's a chance to have the founder in the company. Well, clearly the understanding goes even further, and you enter the secrets of the brand, and you really touch the soul, no, of what the brand is, and how it changes is based on the interpretation of the brand that I have from the outside, and that was confirmed in the inside, and more looking towards the future, no? Because we have to drive the brand to a future that is more in contact with the appeal of the market today, and with the clientele that has to be very precise, because that's the beauty of niche brands. Now you can choose.
Yeah, I've got a question straight off the bat. Yeah, which is, a lot of people, when they go into any industry, irrespective of the watch industry, they always want to get to perhaps the biggest company or the biggest, the it company. So if it's like finance industry, it'd be like Goldman Sachs, right? You were in Bulgari, which is probably one of the main brands within the LVMH portfolio. What attracted you to then make a change and go into an independent brand such as Parmigiani?
Well, I always feel that quality and luxury has to go beyond quantity. And the fact that you have a brand like this one that has its destiny in its hands, because you can really drive the creativity, the style, the technical side. It's a total freedom, no? in expressing the beauty of what luxury product should be, because the beauty of luxury is not the size of the company. The beauty of luxury is the emotion that you can generate in a client, in a watch lover that really is looking for a personal pleasure. No, at the end, we indulge with ourselves in luxury. We are in an hedonistic pleasure, and this has little to do with the size of the P&L of a brand.
Jacqueline?
Yeah, I have a really quick follow-up question to what Guido said, which is about the size of the company. I think you said luxury and quality cannot be measured by size. And recently within the watch industry, you know, we hear this sentence getting thrown around a lot, saying, oh, we are an independent brand, we value freedom, we only produce 20 pieces a year or 40 pieces a year or 200, whatever you call it, as compared to, you know, so something like Rolex, who I mean, they've never publicly stated it, but the educated guess of the public is in the millions, right? Like around the 1 million, or the few tens of thousands for Patek or Vacheron. And my question is, do you believe that, well, do you believe that size is a determining factor, or does it really just doesn't matter at all as long as the quality can be ensured? So say if brand A were to produce 40 watches with the same level of finishing as they can produce in as 200 watches, does size really matter? Because now I think the sentence gets thrown around being like, okay, we're not measured by quantity, we pay more attention to detail with every single one of our watches, but is it more of a marketing technique, or like what is it? What is the determining factor here? And that's something that I'm also thinking about from a collector's perspective, because there are brands that I have talked to recently where they are independent brands thinking of increasing their production in the recent years. Whereas if you watch some of their interviews 2 years ago or 5 years ago, they state that we will never pass our production of, say, 200 pieces a year.
Well, I think it depends on what you are offering. No? If you are in unique pieces and you are at a hyper luxury point of view with a price point which is hundreds of thousands of Swiss francs as an average or above, of course that's a hyper luxury world, and it's a different kind of world. If you are if you are in a price point which is more in a collection of still being very high now, because the sweet spot of the brand is between 20,000 and 50, 60,000 Swiss francs. Now that's the bread and butter of Parmigiani. There you have, you need a minimum scale to be economically able to be competitive at a price point which is still important. But beyond that scale, you have an increase of productivity, but it's less important, and it becomes more the profit that you gain from growing in the volume. So if a brand exceeds a few thousand pieces, you're already in a capacity of being economically sustainable. If you talk about brands of 50 to 100, that's a different thing. That's really almost a tailor-made kind of business, which is completely different. I think what we're talking about Parmigiani is a semi-artisanal culture now, where you blend the beauty of the independent and the freedom of mind that you have in independent, because the independent brands are the ones who are free. Okay, they are not measured by a stock value, and they can do what they want. And it's not by chance that the most coveted brand of the industry are not in the stock exchange market. Okay, all of them, all of them. Okay, because you don't have to measure your success on a quarterly base, and this is extremely important in luxury, because luxury is not about a season or two. Luxury is about forever. Okay, that's the mindset of a durable, hard luxury item like a watch. The life cycle of a watch is the longest life cycle I know of, because there's no other product in the world that can have 100 years of existence. Name me an object in any other category that has 100 years of existence, the same physical technology, the same physical look, the same physical watch. No, is not the same thing. If you look at the 911 of Porsche, the first model is completely different from the 911 of today, because that's the automotive, it's evolution, it's performance, it's technology who evolves. The watchmaking culture is about refusing the innovation of technology. You already did it with the quartz that was more precise and less expensive, and it's happening today with the connected watches. It's not a business. Then they're parallel business. There's two objects that you put on the wrist. There's nothing to do one with another, and they can be overlapping on the same client. But today, high watchmaking is at the highest ever in terms of sales. Watches that we consider 10,000 Swiss francs up as the market of reference of Parmigiani. This segment of the industry is doing 70% of the value, and it's at the highest level ever. So it digested the arrival of millions of connected watches without even seeing them. So that's to contextualize. Then you have a trend which is very clear in these times, where luxury has become so big and watchmaking has become so big that it is normal, it is obvious that you have a counter trend in the public, in the people that are starting to see watches that they don't relate to because over distributed. No? So when you start seeing at the same table people with wearing your same watch, there are certain people that start saying, I want something different. And that's what is happening with the independents. Why independents are so cool is because, first of all, they're independent because they have the freedom of mindset, and this is in the DNA of the founders usually. If you think of Michele Parmigiani in 1975, when everybody was going quartz, all the industry, he was going to restoration and to save a cultural patrimony of Switzerland that was seen as nobody was going into watchmaking. There's a gap of a generation of watchmakers in those years because nobody was going to school to become a mechanical watchmaker, and that in those years. And he was anticipating everybody because he restored the history of watchmaking. No? And this is extremely important. And last year, UNESCO just named this culture as human patrimony. Patrimony of humanity. So you can see the forward thinking of the man. You can feel that he goes in a direction which is not the flow. And this is a mindset. No? And then you interpret your freedom of mindset being able to address a customer who wants to stand out from the mainstream. Mainstream to me is a word that kills luxury. When I hear people in the industry of luxury talking, I want a mainstream product, that means they want to build their P&L. There's no other reason to do a mainstream product in luxury. Because luxury is the opposite. Luxury is to give an emotion which is rare, which is exclusive, which is refined. It should be a drive for excellence. It should be a quest for doing something that is almost impossible to achieve. No, that's the ultimate finality, if you want. But you have to have a bit of the two, no? Because you need to define a style, and a style has to be recognizable. So to build a style, you need time, and you need to do things that are coherent and consistent, and you can build a brand identity that can relate to a certain crowd. But the crowd has to be identified and has to be completely bonding with the brand. There's a sort of mutual relationship with a brand and with a clientele of the brand, the end client of the brand. And it has to be more human possible, because that's the beauty of niche. Niche have a human value that groups do not. And this is extremely important in the relationship, in my opinion.
Do you think that the last 2 years of COVID has actually helped the rise of the independents, including Parmigiani? Because basically a lot of people have just gotten drunk on social media, and pictures and digital media has made a lot of the access to, although you may not own a certain piece, you're seeing the really main characters all the time, to a point where you don't want to see them anymore. So do you actually think, although it took some time, but social media or digital media, through how access is like so much easier, has actually accelerated the rise of independence?
Well, it's I think there is a connection between a relation between COVID and the deepness of the information that people go into, because you had more time to read, you had more time at home, and you had more time to how to say, for your curiosity, no? And then niche brands, it's a bit of a sum of everything, no? Because it's not that the fever for niche brands explodes because of COVID. It was already there. COVID accelerated a lot of things that were latent before already, no? The digitalization was an acceleration, but it was already there before. The niche brands is another thing, and it is not only in watchmaking, because niche brands is an attitude of a person. To be niche, your niche in buying a watch, your niche in how you dress, your niche in what you eat, your niche in what car you have. This is a quest for a personal purchase, no? And it's very important to understand what kind of niche you want to be, because the beauty of the niche is that you're not mainstream, so you can choose. No? And there are plenty of expression, of interpretations of how you can interpret the aesthetics and the technique of a watch. And then the beauty of the niche is that, to me, they have the obligation to be at the frontier of luxury. They are the ones who are pushing the boundaries from an aesthetic point of view and from a technical point of view, because they can experiment. They are sustainable with very few pieces. So they can do things that are quite peculiar, you know. And the important thing is that this way of expressing the style of the brand is consistent within the brand. And it is consistent within the emotion that you want to grasp. And to be specific of Parmigiani, there are two key values of the brand. One is the extreme knowledge and culture that this brand has, that comes from the founder, that comes from Michele's knowledge of every kind of finishing that history has been able to materialize now. Because when you master the techniques of dial making, case making, movement making in the centuries that you have put your hands on, and there was an expression, it's not there anymore in the industry, but they used to be called the golden hands, these kind of masters of craft, like Michele. No? These people that have golden hands were able to touch and feel and create emotions that were with a refinement that is like no other. And the other thing is the understatement, because the other value is that Parmigiani is addressing a client which is not ostentatious, which is a client which is not loud, which is a client which is sensitive to aesthetic, to beauty, to the refinement, but is not somebody who shows off what he has. You will rarely find a customer who rolls up his sleeve at a restaurant to show what watch he has on his wrist. That's not the kind of client that the Parmigiani serves.
Sounds a bit like me, discreet and classy.
Exactly.
Ties in nicely with my next question. Actually, I have two questions here, but the first one is about the clientele. So you keep saying the core customer base for Parmigiani, this niche, they're probably very discreet, they're knowledgeable. So with these kind of clients, how do you educate them with what is coming out from your product line? Or do you even need to market or educate them? Or do you just simply release the pieces and hope the piece itself can, speak for itself?
Well, this is another counter trend in the industry. I think the communication for sure is extremely important, but it has to be deep. It's not by putting under contract an influencer and making post on Instagram that you will sell, because the crowd is not a follower crowd. It's a crowd who has a personality and doesn't need to wear what the other want you to wear. No, it's a personal choice. And then the other counter trend is the distribution, because a lot of brands are verticalizing their distribution to integrate the margin and to make a higher profit, although having a direct distribution is extremely expensive. So you have to also counterbalance the cost of having your own direct distribution. And that's a managerial sensitivity decision. But the beauty of the multi-brands is that they are in contact with a clientele which they know very well, which they have been serving for generations, and they know very well which kind of customer they have fits into this clientele, which is discreet and understated. So the bonding with the distribution as true strategic partners, for me, as a key success factor of intercepting a clientele which is behind the scenes now, because true luxury is not public.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a
oh,
question on from that. Sorry, like when a discreet, I was like half joking when I said, actually, you know, it sounds a bit like me, because I actually don't like wearing pieces exactly how you described that everybody else has, and I don't even like it if I go to a gathering and somebody has the same watch, right? Even amongst the watch collectors that are already quite developed in their journey. But at the same time, there is, maybe it's just me again, a part of me that still wants to flex in the right crowd, right? So I don't want everybody to know what it is. That's just not selected or targeted. But I want a certain person to know what I'm wearing, right? And in that respect, I also don't want to have to tell them, oh, look what I'm wearing here, you know? So how key is it to have a model which maybe like a distance of 5 meters, you can see, oh, that's that model, right? In a brand. I know you've had that brand and you famously worked on the Finissimo. But, you know, if you look at a lot of the more successful like watch brands out there, they do have that recognizable, iconic model, which from a distance you can see, and that's their like silent flex. So that's what I wanted to ask. How important is that for you, for Parmigiani to develop?
Well, Danny, you touched extremely precise, how do you say, pleasure of a customer. No, you said a very important thing. Yeah. You said that you don't care that everybody recognize what you have on the wrist, but you do care that certain people do, and that's the thin line between luxury. Everybody's talking about inclusivity in the business and things that are very in fashion. But there is in luxury, and there's always been since ancient Romans, that they were the first who transformed from Greeks that were looking at the luxury object just from an aesthetic point of view, and they were culturally sharing this beauty to everyone. The Romans were the first that started using luxury as a social differentiator. Okay, so that's the first time that you see in history of humanity that luxury becomes an item of differentiation between people, and this remains today. Everybody can say that it's probably not politically correct, but inside each one of us has a sense of pride, has a sense of self-esteem, has something to be nourished, and which is normal and it's positive. It's driving excellence of humanity, having this as an engine inside you. No? So to have a community in the community that understand what a watch they're wearing is, it's more important to having it known by everybody. So the niche brands have this cool thing that you have to be in the know to know. Okay, so it's a smaller world, but it's a deeper world. And when a person knows what you're wearing, because it recognizes that it's a Parmigiani or it's a Laurent Ferrier or it's another niche brands, I can name a few that share the same emotional need, you have a bonding that is immediate, because your conversation on time on watchmaking immediately starts as two people that are competent. So in the end, what you are showcasing when you wear a Parmigiani watch is not your social status. You're beyond that. You've already materialistic the power of spending that you have. It's already behind you as a will to, as a personal, I'd say, motivating factor, if you want. You are expressing a knowledge. You are expressing a status of a knowledgeable person, of somebody who knows what watchmaking is about, and of a person who does not follow the flow. That's why we took out the logo. You don't need to write the logo on the dial.
Okay.
Because it's intimate. The PF logo, which is beautiful, it's in the golden ratio. It's been designed as a hallmark for passing customs in the gold, with the gold cases. It was just a technical thing, but it was done so beautifully that it became a hidden code of the brand, because it was on the oscillating mass, it was on the crowd, but it was not visible. So when I saw this beautiful graphism that was elegant, refined, classic, but not old-fashioned, no, I put it at 12 o'clock on the dial. That's enough. And I think automotive already showed the way. No, 4 rings are much nicer than writing Audi, or a horse is better than writing Ferrari. No, there you don't need to be descriptive, and because what is the true reason of having a writing of the brand on the dial? It's the communication. When you do a macro of the watch, you have it in big and you have the logo of your brand. You're doing advertising. That client is not doing advertising. That client is has a personal choice, which is intimate. And the public that relates to that needs just subtle elements of recognition. It doesn't need flashy elements of recognition. Okay, then the body, the style of the watch, that has to be recognizable. You're right. Your watch has to be seen from 10 meters away, and it has to be understood what you have on the wrist. It shouldn't be something that is diluted and you can't tell which is which unless you read the dial. No, in watchmaking history, there's huge examples of watches that you take out the dial, is difficult to recognize what it is. Now, especially in the designs of the 50s and the 60s in classic watches. Now that's a typical period of watchmaking where the brand was more into the making of the heritage and the technical side, and the design was not yet pushed. It's in the 70s that you start blossoming this the aesthetic part of the watch, no? And these two things have to correlate together, and you have to choose which are your identifiable aesthetic codes to make it become understood and consistent. No? And this is what we're trying to do, because you asked me what is the future of the brand after my arrival. Well, we are designing a fresh and modern brand identity, which is deeply rooted in this sense of refinement of details that we add on the watches, but it's also linked to the style of understatement that we want to show, but it also has to be contemporary. It also have to intersect a pleasure of a 30-year-old or 40-year-old. So it's a rejuvenation also of the target of the brand. So there's a holistic work that we have started this year, and which is very clear from a product point of view, and it's evolving also in the rest, in communication and in distribution, which are the other levels to build a brand desirability.
Guido, was that a subtle hint? Was that a subtle hint that we were expecting a stainless steel sports watch in the Parmigiani vein in the next couple of years?
Well, the sports steel watch is the PF, because I would say it's more a chic sport watch, because the 40 millimeter on the PF with the micro rotor, to me, is already it's the essential new brand identity. No, then it's a part of the whole collection, and there are plenty of details that are very subtle. No, that they're not in your face. That they are people have to be sensitive to a certain refinement, to a certain level of aesthetic to appreciate them. If you look at the watch and you're not educated to watchmaking, you can oversee things that you discover lately, unless somebody might point out to you the difficulties and the craft that there is there. And I can name a few. First of all, the choice of this minimalistic style, which is which we call it a rich minimalism. So it's a bit of a tension now between the end effect from an aesthetic point of view, which is very pure, which is very iconic and simple, no? And in design, doing the simplest thing is the most probably difficult thing to do. But it's coupled with the making of this style, which is extremely difficult and challenging to make. One example is the guilloche of the dial. No? Guilloche dials have always been in the brand. The brand was born in the 90s, where the style and the taste of the public was more classic, and it anticipated a little bit the rebirth of Breguet. Michele was very into this, say, 18th, 19th century finishings that he put on his brand. But today, that is not seeked out by a crowd that has become less formal, that the life of the people is different 20, 25 years after. No? So you have to you have to live with the people that are wearing your watch. You cannot be still and stiff as the origin. No? You have to evolve your DNA, your soul, and keep it up to date with what is the understanding of today. So the Grand Orche, the guilloche, has been reduced in size in a way that is almost invisible. The guilloche maker, when I asked him to do the smallest size that he could do, he was so proud. Then I saw the prototype, and I said, "Wow, you really went small. I couldn't see it. I couldn't see. If you took a loop and you went in with a loop, you could see the beauty of the work. But then it was too small that it was not understandable by the naked eye. So I asked him, can you do it 10% bigger?" And we did 10%, and it still was small. And then we said, can you add another 20%? So it's a 30% more. And then you saw it, but then it had a different mood, because the bigger the guillochage is, the more it becomes old-fashioned in the mood, in the feeling. No? And then we said, no, this is going towards a public which is a little bit elder, and it's not the right thing to do. And then somebody, things are very strange in development. Sometimes you are lucky also. And the guy in product development said, yeah, but we didn't put a double anti-reflex glass. We only have one anti-reflex glass. Okay, so let's put a double treatment on the glass. And there you saw the 10% increase. So without the anti-reflex, putting in glass, without the double anti-reflex glass, the Grand Orche, the level of size was not understandable from naked eye. But with the double reflex, yes. So when you look at the watch, you don't see the finishing of the guilloche. You see it and you don't see it. It's there, but it's not there. Because when you read the time, you need two hands. That's it. You don't want to be disturbed in reading the time. But the fact that we have this subtle finishing beneath gives you a texture, gives you a richness of craft that is not a plain watch. No? And then the two levels of the minuterie, the indexes that goes above, the index are so small because, as I said before, you don't need nothing else than two hands to read the time. So when you do the indexes that are small and that are outside, they are opening up the dial and they're giving you a feeling which is extremely different from what you usually see on a watch. Now you have two reactions. There are people who tell you it's an empty dial. Okay, that's personal. You see it empty, I see full of purity. It's different. No, so and then you go on to the case. You see, we chose to have a platinum bezel instead of a steel bezel. Why do you want a platinum bezel on steel? It's the same. It doesn't stand out like a two-tone gold on steel. It does, because if your eye is educated, if your sensitivity to craft is educated, you would see that the platinum is whiter than steel and it reflects the light in a better way. And when you polish platinum, it's different than polishing steel. So you take out that edginess of the knurled bezel that is much more subtle, and you're touching something which has an artisanal feeling. So it's like when you when you are looking at an object, you don't look at an object. To feel an object, you have to see, you have to touch, you have at least two senses that are making the beauty. It's like buying a costume, a suit, and you're looking at the fabric. You look at the fabric, but when you touch the fabric, you understand which is the quality. No? And then, so these are all refinements in the clientele that we try to address. And that's why we say that we are sort of applying a sartorial approach to watchmaking, because we go into this level of choices that are expensive to make, but they are subtle and they are appreciated by that crowd that you are interested in being recognized by. Because all the rest, they would just say, oh, it's expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
Are you done with the answer, or?
Oh, I could go on forever on the details, but I can interrupt myself.
No, because I was just thinking about this with there's a lot of talk about, so the clientele is niche, we know this, and with niche clients, they obviously don't really care about the resale value, right? But then you always have a group of people that are going to be concerned about the value and whether the watch will hold value. And then now with like the Hong Kong auctions going on, I'm obviously very curious to know how important is it for Parmigiani to make sure that watches hold value? And if this is not even a concern for you, do you think that as a brand, CEOs should try and manage the price in the secondary market, or just let it be?
I think the secondary market is the effect of the past decisions of the company. Of course, you are willing to maintain the value as much as you can, but it depends on the purity of the choices and on how you have been able to manage your brand in history. So to improve a retail value of a second-hand watch is not something that you do overnight. And it's something that you have to have as an objective, as a long-term objective. So for sure, it is extremely important to keep the value, because I think it's something that is correct to do towards somebody who invested in your brand for a personal pleasure. It is not the first choice of buying a watch, because the first choice of buying a watch remains your hedonistic pleasure, and it should be always like that. And a niche brand can have a value who materializes as a second hand many years after, and you don't know. No, mm-hmm. Certain brands were unsellable 10 years ago, and now they're very interesting. So it's not said that an object per se has a value that is just going down. It can go down and then go back up. It depends on the activity of the brand. So what is my interest, and I entered not even 1 year ago, so it's something that is in the making and it's in the future, is to respect the client that has bought Parmigiani, because you cannot put off a client by injecting into the market novelties for the sake of making revenues. Mm-hmm, okay, because you're killing yourself if you do that. So brands that have been pushing novelties to grow usually have a short-term approach if they're not consistent. So the objective here is to not over-dimension the number of references you have. On the contrary, we should be more focused. We should be more clean in terms of aesthetic choices that we have in the collection. Same thing in distribution, because the other factor is how your distribution is being a strategic partner with the brand, because the resale value is not the responsibility only of the brand, it's the responsibility also of the partners that we have in distribution. So it's a mutual responsibility. And it's a question of really choosing, being focused on those partners that are willing to do the hard work of selling, and not just serving a client by saying, oh, what discount can you give me? Because there are a lot of people who are just opening the door and people come in, I want this watch, which is your price? No, and
Mhm.
if that is the kind of partner that you have, it's better that you question if it's a strategic partner who is building the brand, because we need professionals, we need people who are in contact with the clientele, which is that edgy clientele where we're looking at. We need a partner who is able to explain the sophistication and the craft that we have. So it's really a work which is a teamwork between who has the role of presenting and selling, which is a profession. To integrate a profession like that, it's a métier, it's a skill. No? So the brands have already a lot to do in building an image, building an assortment, a style, a production. You cannot do everything at the same time. You have to do something that is partnering and doing a teamwork with the specialization of the people who are making it happen.
Okay, Dan,
with,
you're on
with
mute.
with so many working parts in what you want to achieve at Parmigiani, having just come in not pretty recently, how long do you think your vision will take to actually implement where the customer then feels it? Obviously, I think some changes you can feel immediately, but really where you want to get it to, how long do you actually feel that takes to implement your vision?
Well, it's difficult to give an answer, but it's for sure a long-term vision that needs time to materialize. And I would say it's a parallel that you can do with my previous experience in Bulgaria, where the Finissimo was born before the acquisition of LVMH in 2011. When I initiated the project with a clear thing in mind, nobody understood what we had in mind until 6-7 years after. So the vision is in the mind of the people who are driving the brands. It becomes understood when it materializes. Okay, so the first step of the vision that we have on Parmigiani is clearly the brand identity that you saw with Tonda PF, which is expressing the style that we discussed about. But this is the starting step where we have to be consistent to the foundation, the refoundation, if you want, that we did. And we have to inject this with a lot of discipline, because of course we have to go back to the board of watchmaking on innovation of movements and being creative also on the technical side, and surprise a clientele with timepieces that are giving you a pleasure which is peculiar, which is particular, which is also fun, because at the end, watchmaking can interact with the clientele based on the functionality of the timepiece that you have. So these are elements that you will see coming up. Of course, we need ideas. We have a few at this stage, but we have to nourish them. And so it's not that a vision is written in stone from day one and then you execute it. A vision evolves, but the founding direction, the founding style and brand identity that you want to build has to be always there as a direction. You cannot, people that say that you have to adapt and change, there are people who are either finding excuses to sell everything they can, or they are not really working in the right direction of the idea at the first place. But to me, the vision has to be clearly stated. It's a direction, like a trajectory. And then to get there, you might have, it's not a straight line. No, it can be, you can have some bumps up and down the road, but the important thing that your final goal remains there.
I have a question about working with Michele, because like you mentioned earlier, he's someone that's very forward thinking, and within the watch industry, I hate to generalize, but watchmakers have been known to be very opinionated, to have their own ideas, right? And focus on this idea, vision that they have. So as a CEO, how do you actually work with or even manage a watchmaker? Like, how does the conversation go? Do they come to you every week and say, this is what I'm working on? Or do you like pop into his like office every day? Like, does it work?
Because I believe his daughter's involved as well, right?
Yeah.
So that's like two.
No, Michele is a person of it's very easygoing. Don't imagine a superstar which has an ego as huge. The beauty of who does restoration is that the modesty is in the work. No? And when I say modesty is with a capital M, because he has nothing to be modest about. But the understatement of the brand comes from restoration. And I tell you very simply, because when you restore, you have to disappear. Your work does not have to be seen because you're restoring the original creator. And he always tells me, if somebody wants to restore a piece that I have restored in 100 years, they don't want to restore Michele Parmigiani, they want to restore the original creator. So imagine the maximum craft that you can imagine in watchmaking, which I call the restoration, the black belt of watchmaking. This work has to be invisible. So the modesty, the understatement, these values come from the devoting your life to giving birth to a work of somebody else. And to do that, you have to be at the top of the skills of the industry. So it's kind of contradiction, if you want, no? But this gives you the person, no, who you have in front. So I met him the second day I was in the office. He lives just next door, so he pops in, and it was a very nice encounter because it was unexpected. I didn't have an appointment with him. I just met him in front of in the corridor in front of my office, and we started chatting like two people. We have the same origin. His parents are from Milano. I'm from Milano, so we started talking Italian, and this started off an understanding. And I immediately understood that he's not a person who dictates. Okay, he's a person who narrates his experience. Now he doesn't have any more an operational role because he's an honorary president of the brand, but he is extremely important in the heritage of the brand. So to me, he's a source of inspiration. He's a sort of like you would go to your grandfather and ask him about his life, about his experience, and what you could do with that today. No? So I share with him the evolutions of the creativities, the what we are working on, and he gives us its take, his gut feeling. It's if it fits in what the brand that still carries his name must respect. No, so and there are always interesting elements of discussion because by just talking about watchmaking, you get to know the object and look at it with different eyes that I've been always looking at the watch for 20 years now. But being in a brand that did not have, I was not encountering restoration of this deep culture of watchmaking that you can feel in his life. Of course, it opens up an education to the eye to things that you didn't understand before. So it's extremely nourishing from my point of view. He's very fond of what we're doing, and he adores this freshness that we are bringing to the brand, and so is he's very involved emotionally, no, in following where the brand is going, and we work more closely on projects that are, I would say, unique pieces, things that are in the making, no, for expressions of objects of art, if you want, that are not part of a collection.
Would you say, for what I'm gathering from what you're saying is that as a restorer, you have to learn so many techniques and your craft in lots of different areas, which then gives you an armory to use when you actually come to make your own watch? But I would also say, if you're restoring watches, you're probably restoring old clocks or old watches, right? Which then have a very heritage and older feel, right? Than what we would probably see as contemporary. So do you find that's what you have to contribute? You kind of touched on it earlier about making Parmigiani relevant to today's people's lifestyle today, right? So is that where you have to find the balance with Michele?
You touched, we are complementary, if you want, in this trajectory, because if he represents the heritage, the knowledge, the culture, the history of the brand, but also the history of these techniques, I bring in a contemporary touch, sense of aesthetics that is more fresh, an understanding of the market, and these two things together make a great synergy, a positive synergy in understanding what we can do with the brand, and respecting the soul of the brand is the first thing. So he is the final check, no, that the brand has been is evolving, but is not going outside the perimeter of what the brand should be. You cannot stretch a brand in every direction. A brand is like a person. You cannot be a camaleonte, then you're one person one day and one person another. That doesn't work like that. And especially in watchmaking, where the understanding of what a brand does takes years. No, we're not in the fashion industry where a season can be the opposite, or a brand can change skin 3-4 times. No, if you look at Gucci, no, what has Gucci gone through the different creative directors that everyone was right for the time that they were living, but you can't recognize really the brand, no, sometimes. And in watchmaking, this would never be possible. You cannot have a brand who changes skin 3-4 times in 20-25 years. You have to have a consistency, and that is a deep understanding of your roots. That's a deep understanding of your values. That's the deep understanding of something that works in the long term. And this, we have to make it clear, because the other thing that Michele is not an entrepreneur, is not a businessman. No, Michele is an artist. Michele is a living legend, but I was saying that it's a person that has those values, and the brand has to respect those values. So it's very important that we evolve the brand, but we do not revolutionize the brand.
I want to talk about so as a watch brand evolving, there's obviously a lot of collaborations, and you guys have collaborated with Hermes, Bugatti successfully. And in the future, are there any collaborations that you can possibly share with us, or an industry that you guys would be looking at to work with?
At this stage, no. I think we're still in an introspective phase now to evolve what deeply we want to be, because collaborations are accelerators of opportunity to sell. No, either they are commercial, or they are more deep if the bonding between collaborations is talking to the same client, and it's becoming something which is really long term. But if in luxury, especially, I'm not very fond of the collaborations for the sake of collaborations, because often they are capsule collections that give more visibility to the designer who is designing than the brand itself. To me, the brand has to own the creativity and has to be the expression of itself. Brand should not be buying creativity, because that means you're ending your ideas. No? A brand should be able to be prolific in creativity and do it personally. The collaboration have to be very wisely chosen, and they have to be very consistent with the brand. But it's a very delicate exercise, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I really appreciate that you recognize that it's not just about creating something just for short term, just to increase sales. It actually has to make sense. And then, it has to mean something to the brand, and they both have to speak to the same clientele. Okay, so I want to go on to our final question, because you did talk about this. You kind of touched upon this topic just now about hoping, so you are trying to grow with your customers, and a lot of these customers might have started into this brand maybe in the late 30s or early 30s, and then slowly they're getting older, and you never want to ignore this initial crowd. So as you know, like Chinese customers have become a huge market. And in one of the older interviews with Forbes, you had mentioned that a lot of your clients in their 30s, and I would even argue in their 20s, they are looking for brands themselves instead of just inheriting what their dad used to wear, what the mom used to wear, right? So they're looking for their own brand. So my first question is, how does Parmigiani navigate this Chinese market? And how do you become an attractive brand for young people while still retaining and still catering to that core set of customers that had grown with you and evolved with you?
Well, first of all, I have to be more precise in what I said before, because to me, when I said you have to respect your customer, you have to respect the customer that bought you recently. No, you have to respect your customer always. Okay, this is true. But what is affecting it was related to the fact that brands keep value or not. No, when you ask me if a brand keeps value, I said you do it if you are respecting the client that you sold the watch to. So if I have my Tonda PF in steel and platinum with a warm break dial, that a client that bought it today, I must not do something that pulls off the coolness of the watch that he just bought, because if I do a blue dial next year, you start having a competition between a new customer and a recent customer. So you have to give the time, and you have to make the customer who just bought you feel cool for a lot of time. Mm-hmm. That's what I was trying to say, and that's why in the introduction of next year, they are very precise, because they have to have their own space and they don't have to disturb the products that we just introduced in the market. And this is extremely important to do in luxury, in my opinion, because when I see too many variants of the same thing, you are creating confusion, and the client, it's pulled off because in a conversation you could say with a friend, yeah, you got the new tool on the PF, but which size, which color, and then there's always somebody who has a cooler watch than you on the same stuff, and that's not correct. You have to really be consistent with yourself. So that is why I wanted to say this. And then the other thing that you asked is to how to appeal to a younger customer. Allora, to me, age has never been a criteria for luxury. Okay,
you're lucky, Jacqueline.
No, I'm saying because it's not a segmentation criteria. Age is something that is part of humanity, no? So saying that you want to have a younger customer, what does it mean? No, it's, first of all, people associate age with price. No, you should be selling lower price to a younger customer. I don't agree. There are plenty of young people who are very wealthy. So I'm not interested in diluting the brand and going to a lower price point to be younger. That's not how you are young. You are young in your style. You are young in what you are conveying in your coolness. You are young in your tone of voice in the communication. You are young in how you face distribution. There are plenty of things to be young, but it's not because you're young that you have to lower your price. And what kind of client is the first question? No, so I'm interested in young people, of course. I'm interested in people who have the wealth to enjoy a Parmigiani brand, of course. But I'm also interested in a person who is understated. So who has a sense of refinement that is superior. So you have to add all these criteria, and then your target becomes, your target is an awful word, but your aficionados, your watch lovers becomes a smaller community. That's when I say that niche brands have to be precise, is because they have to choose their clientele, and their clientele choose your brand. And you don't have to fill in the trap to want to be pleasing everybody, because then you're diluting your soul. You're becoming mainstream, and you're becoming less interesting. So the important thing is to really, and I think COVID helped me a lot in entering the brand, because although it was extremely difficult, because to know your staff by Zoom is something that is a torture test of any manager, and I still haven't met in person some of my staff, which are in China and Hong Kong, or in the States, and this bothers me a lot, because I need the contact of the people, no, that I work with. But on the other side, it was an accelerator of this introspective work that we needed to do in this foundation job that we're doing. So it was possible to be very accurate in defining who you want to be and who you want to serve, and that is extremely important to me, because everything starts who you're interested to please. It's a bit like what Daniel was saying. No, I want to be recognized not by everybody, but a few people, and that I bond with, and that's the same thing that we're doing at the brand level.
Long Long likes to be recognized by everyone, but I like to be a bit more discreet and classy personally. I don't like to trump on about it, but facts are facts, unfortunately. But I do want to, I have a final question, because I think it ends very nicely on respecting the client, right? A lot of what you said today was about respecting the client, whether it was through the design, whether it was through the pricing, whether it was through the resale value. One term I think is very overused within the watch industry is in-house, you know, and I think that term is disrespectful not only to the knowledge that connoisseurs or the more knowledgeable watch collectors are, but it's also disrespectful to the things that are actually done in-house, you know. I understand that Parmigiani has quite a strong production on what they actually can make. You know, you've got pretty, I think, vertically on a lot of things. What is actually like in-house and what isn't on a Parmigiani?
Thank you for the question, because I think communication has to be truthful, and in-house is one of those abused words by the industry, because to master really the métier, the know-how, is something different than just to assembling parts that you buy outside. No, so Parmigiani was born in 1996 from a métier of restoration. When you're doing restoration, you are doing everything. Okay, you're doing a screw, you're reworking an escapement, you're redoing a barrel, you're redoing bridges, wheels, everything, and you're doing them in the technique of the past. You know, I was really moved by the people who work on restoration, and I felt the emotional pressure that they are living every day, and it's something that oppresses you. There's a woman who has done restoration for over 20 years, and she had a difficult moment of her life, and she told me I had to step back a little bit, and I asked to do grand complications only. And I said, wow, why? Because it's easier. I can do mistakes on a grand complication. On restoration, I cannot. Okay, so if I lose a screw, I look for it. And because until the 19th century, the screws were not standardized. So every watchmaker did his own. So if you lose the screw, you have to do the screw like the watchmaker did its own screw to be, no, so it's a 1 day of work. So it's a completely different way. And this is really something that still is in the brand, because we still restore ancient pieces of private clients that don't find anybody else but Parmigiani to repair their beautiful private collection. So it's not a Parmigiani watch that we're restoring, but it's maybe an ancient pocket watch from Russia of the Tsar or something else. No, so this craft exists, and it's an atelier that does a few pieces a year in this level of competence. But having somebody who mastered this as an atelier privately for 25 years before making his brand, when he does his brand, obviously he starts saying, well, I'm extending my way of working, and I do a production like I did restoration. So he started by doing his own movements and in a bigger scale. Of course, at the beginning there were a few pieces. He could do it with tools of a atelier of mechanics that was being able to do this. But then when the foundation decided we want to help you out, and why don't we do a brand together, and they backed him up. They started giving means to, and very important means to develop production of movements first, then cases, dials, up to regulating organs, screws, everything. Of course, it was done at the beginning with the ambition to serve Parmigiani brand. In fact, these métiers, they were Parmigiani. I remember when I started the watchmaking industry in the year 2000, there was a limited edition of Bulgari on the rectangle that had the Parmigiani movement inside. That's the first time I heard Parmigiani in the year 2000. It was a power reserve, the movement that Parmigiani calls the hebdomadaire, 8 days power reserve, mechanical manually winded watch. It was extremely refined, very beautiful. Now, that was done in-house, and it was a Parmigiani movement. Then to be able to be profitable and to be able to be sustainable, when you have an industrial site, you need volume. There is a critical mass under which you're losing money. Therefore, there was a moment in which it was decided to make a spin-off from Parmigiani of the manufacture of movements. So it became Vaucher. And Vaucher, still owned by the foundation, has become a high-end producer of movement that serves Parmigiani, but also few very, very high-end exceptional brands in the industry who can enjoy and can act at a certain price that can allow themselves to enjoy that kind of finishings. Same thing for the cases, same thing for the dials. So when you visit the manufacturing sites that are integrated into the pôle Roger of the foundation, where the brand is, you want the public face because it's serving a client directly with a watch. It also serves other brands, and it's but we work together. And the beauty of this is that everybody says, you master the know-how, but that's not to me, the most important value of being integrated. The most important value of integration is development, because you are developing holistically the timepiece together. And you cannot imagine the synergies and the possibilities that just giving a 1/10 of a millimeter of tolerance, or a few cents of a millimeter of tolerance to a dial maker, and that tolerance can come from a case maker. It's a completely easier work to produce and to be more reliable. So the fact that who is constructing cases and dials takes a drawing from Parmigiani, which is already a drawing which is quite advanced from a technical point of view, but then has to be transferred to something producible. The fact that the developers of a case and a dial are in the same room, they are talking together, they are developing things together, and then when you assemble the watch, it's not something that you're like a star system where you go to a specialist of case maker, which is an external case producer, or to a dial maker, and then you assemble, and it's a brand that has to troubleshoot the issues. Those issues are anticipated in the making, and they can become extremely reliable, and that is the reason for which we were able to launch the Tonda PF only in a few months, because it would never have been possible to do purchasing parts outside. And there are very few brands who have this internalized. Usually it's a group that has this capacity, but in a group, again, the brands are not linked to the manufacturing, because the manufacturing serves all the group. And you have this tension between what the brand wants and what the producer of cases wants, and they have to be aligned. And that's the reason for which in Bulgaria I had integrated all the acquisitions that were done before me into one only company, because you have to work as a unique with a unique objective, which is the watch that you want to produce. And this is extremely important, that you can get a lot of value out of that.
Well, thank you so much for being so honest with your answer. It's, you know, I think it's very refreshing to have a CEO be a bit honest about like the term in-house. Um, I have one more question actually, because it's going to, I don't know when I'm ever going to get you back on, and I want to make the most of it while you're here. But here's a follow-on question from the in-house thing. Like, I think Jack has just come back from Geneva, and she was saying that, you know, out of the independent watchmakers she visited, a lot of those people are actually now, because of this in-house thing, and perhaps the consumer is getting more educated about, okay, not just independent brands, what it takes to actually make a watch properly. People are looking to buy older equipment or equipment to try and bring more things in-house. Yeah. Do you think that as the consumer matures, they will be demanding legitimate and honest in-house from watch brands, especially the independents?
It depends on the client. And it depends on what he's looking for, no? Because there are two trends that I see that are in opposition. The one is along with mainstream, and the more the luxury becomes mainstream, the less you are into that, because you're not interested. I have many examples of funny anecdotes. A client in a dealer that was telling me that he just sold a mini repeater, and a couple of weeks after, the client phoned and said, "But what is this thing at 9 o'clock outside the case?" "It's a lever to actually your mini repeater." Okay, I didn't know. Thank you. So that client was there just to buy a valuable piece, expensive, rare, limited edition, or I don't know what. So there are plenty of clients who are looking into watchmaking without the deepness of the understanding. And the more you are expressing your social status, the less you're really interested in going to the detail of how it's made, because you trust the brand and you say it's okay. But then the independents, the clients that we are serving, are extremely more picky and extremely more interested in truthful information. No? So it is extremely important to be authentic. This is truth everywhere. I mean, you cannot bullshit a client anymore.
Yeah,
I never have, but it's not something that you can see it not in communication sometimes, that you're trying to stretch. You see people who are owning brand, who are owning terms that they shouldn't be using because it's a bit of a stretch, no? But you have to be truthful to the métier that you're using, and you have to inject into the watch the value, because it's not the price that you're selling, is what you're giving at that price that is important, no? So the more content you put, the more work, craft, the more integration you can have, because you are mastering it, is positive. But it's not something that I see as mandatory. No? It depends on the client that you want to serve. On the other side, niche brands have also the problem of being served properly, no? Because when you are externalizing your production, you have to find suppliers that are at your dimension. Otherwise, you're served at the 30th day of the month, and you don't have the same level of service that you need. And sometimes, for very small production, you can also decide to have an integration of like a prototyping. If I think of Kari Voutilainen, that does a few tens of pieces a year, he has internalized all the data making, all the things that because of that mastery that he wants. So, and he has worked with Michele in restoration before starting his own brand. So it's a part of the same kind of philosophy, if you want.
Mm. Thank you so much, Guido, for being so honest, and it's very refreshing to hear all of that. We're going to be a bit more honest with you because we have now a quick fire session. Yeah,
Okay.
asking you, a bit more, a few questions away from watchmaking, actually. So
Voilà.
we're going to give you a break from that. Yeah, I know some of my questions were very difficult, and I appreciate really how well you answered them. I do. But the first question of the quick fire is, what's key in being a good CEO, in your opinion?
This is a very deep question. But for me, the most important thing in being a leader is to be honest with your people, and to be leading by example, and to have a direction which is clear.
Okay.
These three things to me are in this order, no? Because integrity to me is the most important quality, no? I would say courage is the most important quality, because that allows you to face it with integrity, moments of difficulty.
Good answer. Right. Second question, bit easier. What's your favorite food?
Luckily, I'm Italian, so I cannot name only one because I have plenty of dishes, but it depends.
A proud Italian, sounds like.
A proud Italian. I would love a piatto di pasta with fish food, fresh ingredients. I could name many recipes, but of course, I'm quite into my own origin. So Italian food is my favorite.
It's a shame, actually. A lot of places do mess up pasta because it's not al dente as Italians like have it. They have that little bit of like, it's normally overcooked in a lot of places, isn't it?
Well, that you're touching another very delicate matter, because in Italy, once I was in an interview, and I was explaining a chronograph, and somebody said, but now chronograph I just use to measure the cooking of the pasta now. It was a joke, but I didn't laugh because Italians don't look at the watch to cook pasta. No,
Yeah.
you take out the pasta from the boiling water, and you taste it.
Yeah.
And then you say another 20 seconds. No, and then you take it out, because that moment defines you socially. When you are inviting a guest, and if it's 30 seconds overcooked or undercooked, you are judged. So al dente is a lot.
Yeah, I'm led to believe, because I was originally from the UK. I'm led to believe that Italians generally don't look at the clock. Generally,
no.
I tried to phrase that in the most PC way I could.
Deep cut.
Yeah, but at the end, they're quite on time. It's not precise at the minute, but
you said it and I didn't. Right. Next one touches on your Italian roots. Switzerland or Italy to live?
Well, it's 20 years that I'm living in Switzerland, so the choice for the life is quality of life in Switzerland is very high. So I enjoy living in Switzerland, but it's a tough one because my soul is Italian. So I would be torn. I would love to be able to live in two countries in the same moment, but I cannot answer to that question.
Okay. All right. Number 4. Quotes you live your life by. Do you have a favorite quote or saying or anything you refer back to?
Well, there are many quotes that I have related to. I think there are a couple that I don't know if I'm going to say them correctly, but I enjoyed one of Mike Tyson that he said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that is very truthful, and it's important that when you get punched in the face, you understood where the punch came from, and you do something about it to not make it happen again. So that's one that was fun when I read it. And actually, I saw it on a poster in New York in a record player in a record shop, and the other one probably is from Winston Churchill that said something similar, that when your 20s you are trying to be liked now by people and trying to fit in, and then in the 40s you understand that it's better to do what you truly believe that is right, and then when you get to 60 you understand that nobody gave a damn what you think you were. So sometimes you're living in a loop, and it's easier to step outside of your own life and look yourself from the top, and say, am I doing things that are really relevant, or am I just spinning the wheel?
True. Right. Next one. The first thing you do when you wake up.
Coffee. Anzi, a cappuccino.
Oh, not espresso.
No, cappuccino, homemade cappuccino with a foam that has to be extremely, the sugar has to stay at least 5 seconds on the foam before going inside.
I need to share a coffee with you. You sound like you know what you're talking about.
Yes, and absolutely no, you have to do your own coffee. You have to, the quantity you decided, not a capsule in plastic or aluminium.
Are you listening, Long Long? Because you're just like Starbucks cold brew. You're just completely Starbucks cold brew, right? And I don't know how much you pay for that.
I don't know, but I was told that somebody who was running Starbucks understood that Italy was not the first market to start with coffee, and then now they entered Italy. But I think every Italian does his own coffee his own way.
Right. Next one. What's your personal favorite model for the current catalog?
The Tonda PF micro rotor in steel.
Okay. Right. And next one. One Chinese custom that you haven't fully understood when you've ever come to China. You don't really get that tradition or why they do it.
Ula, that's going to be difficult and very
I don't
touchy.
think I can even think of one.
I can think of tons.
No, I think of tons, man. Lots of people like they talk about the chicken feet. They're like, why do we eat chicken feet? Yeah.
Oh, that's a custom?
Well, it's just
I can think of one. The century-old egg.
Oh,
Pidan.
Yeah, that's true. That's fun.
Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of respect for cultures in general, and I tend not to. Being Italian, and sometimes you're always associated with pasta, pizza, spaghetti. It's a bit reductive, no? Being the country who did the Rinascimento and has 80% of the artistic world value in the territory. So it's a bit. But when I think of Chinese culture, it goes back so many thousands of years that it's a monument to me. No, that's why I never did commercial things with Chinese products. I dislike when somebody puts a monkey on a dial because it's a Euro monkey. I find this diminishing, no, and then it's personal. I don't want to judge who does it, but it's me that I would never do it. So to me, it's trying to understand how I can bond, no, with a culture which is different from ours, and there are deeper ways than doing that, and I would love to be able to address it in a profound way.
Well, we can give you a trial by fire next time you come to Shanghai, right? I'm going to set up like 10 dishes, right? And we're going to say, we're going to just record that.
No, but the funny thing that I just recently learned is that the symbology of certain things, take colors, no, they change according to the generation. No, I understood that sometimes blue can be a funeral color, but not for a younger person, or green that has become now a symbology of money, and before it was not. It had a different reason. So this transformation of things is difficult to grasp from me, from the outside. So I need a lot of help in not doing cultural mistakes that have, and this is very important.
Actually, it would be interesting to see how. Actually, I don't know, but you know how green dials are all the rage now, and it would be interesting if there's like any statistics to show how green dials do in China, because the color green isn't really like a good color in the Chinese context, under some contexts. So yeah, but that's certainly something that Westerners wouldn't understand, right?
Exactly.
Well, I think when Western brands come in, man, it's like always red.
Red.
Yeah, or
Red or
like
yellow.
gold.
Yeah.
Yellow, this kind of stuff. It's so unimaginative, such a clear money grab.
Well,
It's
so
so
that-
bad.
So Danny, if you had to name a color that speaks deeply and positively to a Chinese culture, what would you name?
Yeah, well, red. Yeah, you didn't say, Guido. Yeah, like design me a watch, because then you can catch me later, right after the call.
No,
and I'll
no,
charge
no.
the consultancy fees. Like, you
No,
just
but
said
it-
what color. You didn't say on a watch.
No, color. It's
Yeah.
it's something that moves me. and
The thing
understand.
is like it. I don't think you can just do a dial red, or just
No.
put. It's got to be done in a tasteful way, which can add to. I think Jacqueline just said it. In the right context, certain colors are going to make sense, because green has got a lot to do with youth and new beginnings, like in China. So it depends how you would put that, maybe.
But green also has like a negative connotation
Yeah, it
under
does, yeah.
certain contexts.
Yeah, it
So
does.
yeah.
Right, let's go on to the next one. What was the last thing you watched on YouTube?
The last thing I watched on YouTube probably was something related to motorbikes, because that's my other passion. And I
Ah, I
think
see.
it was the new release of the MV Augusta with Agostini's 311 limited edition.
Nice.
Mm.
Right, on our last two now. What's the first drink you order when you get to the bar?
Depends on my mood.
That's interesting, actually, because everybody, like a lot of people say that answer. Some people go straight up to like whiskey, but some people, they say the mood.
First
quite
of all,
cool.
it depends if it's an aperitivo or if it's a bar after dinner. So if it's an aperitivo, it could be, I don't know, either a spritz or an americano, things like this. But it really depends. I'm not a repetitive person on that side. It depends on what comes to my mind.
Right. And the last one, the habit you have that your friends and family complain the most about.
The habit that I have that my friends and family complain about. Allora, friends and family are already two different groups, because I would say that I'm seen as somebody who is quite stubborn. So can be opinionated. I'm quite opinionated when I relate to people, and because I believe in what I say. So sometimes I can be seen as something that has a connotation like that. But usually, on the positive side, it would be somebody very reliable.
Okay. Well, Guido, thank you for being such a good sport on the podcast. I'm sure the audience must have enjoyed it as much as we did. It's a shame, the time just flew by.
Yeah.
So, if you want to check out Parmigiani, you can go to their website. You also check out their Instagram. And if you liked our episode, please follow us at the Waiting List Podcast. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much, Guido, again.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It's been really fun.
Much.
And thank you for everyone who listened to the end. Bye-bye.
As always, thank you for listening to the Waiting List Podcast.
We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. And if you have any questions,
comments,
or feedback,
feel free to reach out to us at the Waiting List Podcast on Instagram or via our private accounts.
We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.